In these movies, we're going to go through some manipulations in Photoshop and Illustrator to create a font using FontForge. We'll start off by looking at how we can modify the letter form, and we'll see a couple of variations. And then we're going to take our letter and we're going to move it into Adobe Illustrator. And to expedite the process, we're going to take advantage of the actions that are available both in Photoshop and Illustrator. And then we'll end up with a font, and we'll just bring in our artwork into FontForge, and then after everything is said and done, we'll have a working font. In Photoshop, we're going to start off by creating artwork that'll fall in exactly into a template that's already set up for Adobe Illustrator, so that the Illustrator file can be exported as a scalable vector graphic SVG file into FontForge. And that's this file in here. This is an M space. It's 1,000 units by 1,000 units. The baseline corresponds with the default setting in FontForge. If you want to change your font on that, you can. If you want to change the location of the type, you can. But for now, this is set up just so that everything streamlines a little bit easier. So I'm going to start off by creating a new document, and the dimensions are already set since this is the last time I did my experiment. They stuck. The width is 1,000 units. That's our M square pixels. The height is 1160. It's a little bit taller than the X height in Illustrator, and that's just so in the event that I want to include accent marks or tildes in the letter, there's space enough for me to do that. But if there still isn't enough space, you can always increase this number size. So you kind of have to decide what font you're going to be working with and how it's going to be manipulated. So the resolution is 72 pixels per inch, and it does have to be grayscale in order to generate a black and white image. So we'll go ahead and create that. I've inserted these pause spots so that you can pause the movie and catch up with the tutorial. So whenever you hear the little alert, what you're going to want to do is pause the video, and then you can move on to Photoshop or Illustrator or FontForge, whatever application we're working on, and then you can catch up, and then you can come back to the movie and click on the play movie on the play, so that way the movie can keep on playing. Hopefully this will make some sense. If this starts to work, let me know in the comments, and if not, I'll ditch it for the next series of movies. Okay, so before I get started, just so that we're all on the same page, I'm going to go ahead and do a reset of my graphic and web format. And so everything's now in the default value for that particular work model. So I'll double click on my layers or my libraries here, and just to collapse that. I'm not going to be using that. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is create, this is important, I want to create a solid background color, and it's going to be white for my background. And this is going to be saved with the letter that I'm going to be manipulating. So then I'm going to go ahead and grab my text tool, and I'll come in here and I'm just going to type in the letter A, and the dimensions of my font are in 1000 by 1000. So I'm just kind of eyeballing the centering. Okay, so here's how this is set up. I've got 1000 is the point size. In the paragraph, it's being centered. That way I can assure whatever I type in here will always have enough margin around the outside for any kind of a manipulation. Notice that I did center it in the artboard. I didn't try to line the baseline, because what's more important is that if I do any distortions on this, I don't want the distortions to bleed outside the artboard, because then I won't be able to save that as an image for Illustrator to generate the outlines. So you can bring it down to the baseline if you think you need it that way, but if you do, you'll just have to think about resizing the image. And it'll be apparent once you've played around with this after a while why you would need to do that. Okay, so I'm going to select both these two top layers, the the A text layer and the background layer. And over here on my layers options, I'm going to go ahead and convert both of those layers together into a single smart object. Okay, so it's a smart object. What that means is I can add filters, any kind of manipulation that I want. I can do that, and then all I need to do is double click and change the letter, and the manipulation will change to the individual letters exactly the same way. So the easiest thing to do would be something like add a blur. So I'll do a Gaussian blur. And I'll hit OK. And now right up above the letter, I'm going to add an adjustment layer for levels. And then if I pinch my levels in here, I can get a different feel for the letter. I can go really thin if I want to, thinner than I just showed you. And I can go really super thin like that. And the tighter these get together, I also get this kind of anti-aliasing. So if I double click in here, and now I select my letter, and I'll type a capital B in here, I'll save that, do a Command W, and now you can see how it's manipulating that letter. So this adjustment would work. Other adjustments that you can have, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, and I'm going to turn off my Gaussian blur. And while that layer is selected, I'm going to go to the filter drop-down menu, and I'm going to do a pixelate, and I'm going to add a halftone screen. Now, because I'm working in black and white, the first layer is the one that counts. If I'm working in RGB, it would be the first three layers, so it would be red, green, and blue. And if I were working in CMYK, it would all be all these four layers all together, or channels. And in this case, I'm only going to be working in gray, so this is going to modify that. I'll leave this at 10. I really do prefer a bigger size, but I'll let you see what it's doing. So go ahead and hit OK. And you can see that it's just adding dots right to the outer edge. So let's make that a little bit bigger. I'm going to double click on the halftone screen here, and I'm going to increase that to, let's say, 50. And we'll do OK. And now you see I get these big giant dots. The angle in here is determined by the first setting. So in here, if I type in 0, everything's going to go straight. Or if I type in back to the, I'm going to get rid of the Gaussian blur. I don't need that, so I'll just drag that out. Okay, so over here I'll double click on that. And if I do a 45-degree angle on channel number 1, it changes it slightly. My preference for me is to just go ahead and make the halftone 72 angle degrees. And I like the slight diagonal. What's interesting about this is if I back away from this, you can see that the B still reads like a regular B at a smaller size, and it just starts to become diagonal when you're looking at the dots really big. And I like that effect. Adding this doesn't do anything because everything's already kind of great. One, it's not being blurred, so I'm not going to need this layer either, so I'll just go ahead and trash that. Okay, so I've got everything I need for my manipulations. I'm going to go ahead and save this file, and I'm going to go to my desktop. And in my desktop, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'll go ahead and call this dot. It's nice to have the folder on the desktop while you're creating your files, because you can always open the folders up so that you can see what's going on. So this is the Photoshop file that's saved in this dot folder. Okay, and now what I want to do is just essentially save this as a JPEG file. So I'll show you right now where everything is in manual mode. I'll go ahead and finish this bring it back into Illustrator. So I'm going to go ahead and do a save as. So that's a Shift Command S, and I'm going to save that as a JPEG. So, or PNG will work, whatever you want to bring it into Illustrator. And this is going to be the letter B, so that's what I've got showing. So I'll type in the letter B there, and I'll go ahead and hit save. And save it for JPEG. Now I'm going to go into Illustrator and I'll open up my dot folder and I'll just drag this in. So the idea is that there's going to be an automation in here as well that's going to take this and line it up exactly into these corners, and then the automation is going to go ahead and do a trace, and we want to do the black and white logo option. And then we're going to break it apart, expand the artwork, and we'll go ahead and hit OK. And all of this is going to be automated. Right now everything's kind of locked together. I want to select just everything that's white. So I'm going to click only on this surface, and then I'll do a select same appearance. And that selects all the white that's the same color, and you can see I'm pulling out the negative space out. I'll delete that. And what's left behind is just the outline of the letter B. Now the next thing that's going to happen automatically, once I get that programmed, is I'm going to go to the object drop-down menu, and I'm going to go to my path, and I'm going to simplify that. And I'm going to use this option over here, and I'm going to go with the auto simplify so it does whatever the right setting is, and I'll hit OK. And that simplified the dots. You can see these circles now are made up of 2 points as opposed to 4 points, and some of these other points in here were simplified. There's still a lot of points in here, but it's not near the maximum of what FontForge will allow, which I think is something like 1500. Anyway, once you have that done, then the next step is to save this. We want to save as, and we want to save that as a scalable vector graphic, SVG. So we want this to be B. We'll save that, and we'll go ahead and go with the default settings. And over here in my folder, I've got my SVG graphic, and it's this file that I'm going to be using to import into FontForge into the B location, and I'll just do that one at a time. Now this went by fairly fast for the letter that I'm working with, but 26 times 2 plus numbers plus punctuation marks and any kind of unusual glyphs, this really could take a long time. So in the next movie I'm going to show you how to automate this process so you can save a little bit of time, and you don't have to concentrate too much on what you're doing. It's just a matter of keeping track what letter or mark you're on, and then you can move forward to get the whole thing completed a little bit faster than doing everything one at a time. So we'll catch you in the next movie.